The morning sun cast long shadows across the Naval Training Center as Sarah Martinez walked quietly through the corridors. At 28 years old, she looked like any other instructor on base, medium height, athletic build, with her dark hair pulled back in a regulation ponytail. Nothing about her appearance suggested the extraordinary skills she possessed or the dangerous missions she had completed in some of the world's most hostile territories. Sarah had been back stateside for only 3 weeks after completing a classified operation in Southeast Asia. The transition from active combat duty to training new recruits always felt strange, like switching from a high-speed chase to walking through a museum. But she understood the importance of her new role. These young men and women would one day serve alongside people like her, and their lives might depend on the lessons she taught them. As she rounded the corner near the mess hall, she heard voices ahead. Loud, boastful, and unmistakably male. 4 recruits stood clustered near the equipment storage area, their conversation carrying clearly in the morning air. "I'm telling you, women don't belong in combat roles," declared Jake Morrison, a stocky recruit from Texas with an attitude as big as his home state. "They're just not built for it, physically or mentally." His friend Ryan Chen nodded in agreement. "Yeah, they'll just get in the way when things get serious. I heard they're lowering standards just to let them pass." The third recruit, Marcus Williams, laughed harshly. "My dad always said the military was going soft, letting women think they can do a man's job. Next thing you know, they'll be trying to join the SEALs." The fourth member of their group, Tommy Rodriguez, seemed less certain but went along with the others. "I don't know, guys. Some of the female instructors here seem pretty tough." "Tough?" Jake scoffed. "Give me a break. Put any one of them in a real situation, and they'd fold like a house of cards. They're playing dress-up in uniforms they haven't earned." Sarah paused at the corner, listening to their conversation. She had heard similar comments countless times throughout her career, though usually not quite so openly disrespectful. In her early days, such words might have sparked anger or hurt her feelings. Now, after years of proving herself in ways these recruits could barely imagine, she felt something closer to pity for their ignorance. She could have walked away, taken another route to her destination, and avoided the confrontation entirely. That would have been the easy path, the one that avoided unnecessary drama. But something about their tone, the casual dismissal of every woman who had ever served with honor and distinction, made her decide otherwise. Sarah adjusted her plain gray training shirt and continued walking toward them. She wasn't wearing any rank insignia or name tape that might give away her identity. To them, she would appear to be just another female personnel member, perhaps a secretary or administrative worker. As she approached, the 4 recruits noticed her presence. Jake's eyes lit up, with an opportunity to prove his point to his friends. He stepped slightly forward, blocking part of her path. "Excuse me, miss," he said with exaggerated politeness that barely concealed his condescending tone. "Are you lost? The administrative offices are back that way." Sarah stopped and looked at him calmly. "I'm exactly where I need to be, thank you." Ryan snickered. "See? They don't even know their way around the base properly." The group had now arranged themselves in a loose semicircle around her. Not quite threatening, but definitely intimidating in the way that 4 large men surrounding one smaller woman could be. They seemed to think this was some kind of game, a chance to demonstrate their superiority. "You know what, sweetheart?" Jake continued, his voice dripping with false concern. "This is a military facility. It's not really a safe place for civilians. Maybe you should head back to wherever you came from before you get hurt." Sarah's expression remained completely neutral. "I appreciate your concern for my safety, but I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Marcus stepped closer, his bulk casting a shadow over her. "Look, lady, we're trying to be nice here. This isn't a place for people who can't handle themselves. Why don't you run along before something happens that you can't deal with?" The 4th recruit, Tommy, looked slightly uncomfortable with the direction things were heading, but he didn't speak up. Peer pressure and the desire to fit in with the group kept him silent. Jake moved even closer, now standing directly in front of her. "You know what? Maybe you need a demonstration of why women don't belong here. Maybe you need to understand what real strength looks like." He reached out his hand as if to grab her arm, confident that he could easily overpower this unremarkable-looking woman. In his mind, this would be a quick lesson that would send her scurrying away while proving his point to his friends. Sarah watched his hand approach with the same calm attention she had once used to track enemy movements through her rifle scope. Time seemed to slow as years of training and combat experience automatically calculated distances, angles, and the precise amount of force that would be required. The moment his fingers made contact with her sleeve, everything changed. What happened next would be talked about in hushed, amazed whispers throughout the training facility for months to come. In the space of less than 20 seconds, these 4 confident recruits would discover that they had chosen to confront someone whose skills were far beyond anything they had imagined possible. Jake's hand had barely closed around Sarah's arm when she moved. The motion was so swift and precise that none of the 4 recruits fully understood what had happened until they found themselves in completely different positions than they had been moments before. Sarah's right hand shot up and caught Jake's wrist, her fingers finding exactly the right pressure point to send a shock of pain through his entire arm. At the same time, she pivoted on her left foot, using Jake's own forward momentum against him. Before he could react, she had twisted his arm behind his back and guided him down to the concrete floor with controlled force. Jake found himself face down on the ground with Sarah's knee pressed lightly but firmly against his back. His arm held in a position that made any movement extremely uncomfortable. The entire sequence had taken perhaps 3 seconds. Ryan, seeing his friend suddenly on the ground, moved to help. He was bigger than Jake and had played football in high school, so he approached with confidence. Sarah saw him coming without even turning her head. Peripheral vision was something she had trained extensively during her years in special operations. As Ryan reached for her shoulder, Sarah smoothly released Jake and flowed into her next movement. She caught Ryan's incoming hand, stepped inside his reach, and used a hip throw that sent all 200 pounds of him sailing through the air to land with a heavy thud on the ground 3 feet away. The technique was perfect. Ryan wasn't seriously hurt, but he was definitely stunned and temporarily out of breath. Marcus and Tommy stood frozen for a moment, trying to process what they had just witnessed. This woman, who they had assumed would be helpless against one of them, had just effortlessly handled 2 of their strongest members in under 10 seconds. Marcus was the first to recover from his shock, his pride wounded by seeing his friends defeated so easily. He charged forward with the kind of wild aggression that might work in a bar fight, but was completely useless against someone with Sarah's training. Sarah remained perfectly calm as the 220-pound recruit rushed toward her. She waited until the last possible moment, then stepped aside and helped him continue his journey in the same direction he had been heading. A simple foot sweep combined with a guiding push sent Marcus crashing into a nearby equipment locker with a resounding clang. Tommy, the 4th and final recruit, found himself alone facing this mysterious woman who had just dismantled his 3 friends like they were children playing at being soldiers. His earlier discomfort with the situation had turned into genuine fear. He raised his hands and took a step backward. "I don't want any trouble, ma'am," he said quickly, his voice cracking slightly. Sarah nodded approvingly. Smart choice. The entire confrontation had lasted exactly 18 seconds from start to finish. Jake was still on the ground, holding his wrist and looking stunned. Ryan was slowly sitting up, trying to figure out how he had ended up on his back. Marcus was leaning against the equipment locker, shaking his head to clear it. Sarah stood in the center of the scene, her breathing completely normal, not a hair out of place. She looked at each of the 4 recruits in turn, her expression calm but serious. "Gentlemen," she said in a voice that carried absolute authority, "I think we need to have a conversation about assumptions." Jake struggled to his feet, his face red with embarrassment and anger. "What the hell was that? You can't just attack people. We weren't even really threatening you." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You surrounded me, made intimidating comments about my safety, and then physically grabbed me without permission. In the civilian world, that's assault. In the military, it's conduct unbecoming." Ryan had managed to get back on his feet as well, though he was still moving gingerly. "But you're not military. You're just what?" Sarah asked quietly. "You're just a woman. he finished lamely. Marcus pushed himself away from the locker, his earlier bravado completely gone. How did you do that? Are you some kind of martial arts expert or something? Sarah smiled for the first time since the encounter began, though it wasn't a particularly warm expression. You could say that. Among other things. Tommy, who had been the smartest of the group by backing down, found his voice. Who are you? It was at that moment that Petty Officer First Class Jenkins rounded the corner, apparently drawn by the commotion. He took in the scene, 4 disheveled recruits, equipment scattered about, and Sarah standing calmly in the middle of it all. Is there a problem here? Jenkins asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Jake straightened up, seeing an opportunity to regain some face. This woman attacked us. We were just trying to help her find her way, and she went crazy. Jenkins looked at Jake for a long moment, then turned to Sarah. When he saw who it was, his entire posture changed. He immediately came to attention and saluted. Ma'am, I didn't realize you were here. Is everything all right? The 4 recruits looked confused by Jenkins' sudden change in demeanor and his obvious respect for the woman who had just defeated them. Sarah returned the salute casually. Everything's fine, Petty Officer Jenkins. These recruits and I were just having a discussion about proper military protocol and respect for fellow service members. Jenkins nodded seriously. I see. Would you like me to escort them back to their quarters? That won't be necessary, Sarah replied. I think they're about to receive some valuable education about making assumptions. Quote, Jake looked back and forth between Sarah and Jenkins, clearly not understanding what was happening. Wait, what's going on here? Who is she? Jenkins stared at him in disbelief. You don't know who this is? The 4 recruits shook their heads, still completely confused by the turn of events. Sarah stepped forward, her voice taking on the unmistakable tone of command authority. Allow me to introduce myself properly. Since we seem to have skipped that step earlier, Sarah reached into her pocket and pulled out her military identification card, holding it up for the 4 recruits to see. The morning sunlight caught the official seal and made the text clearly visible. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Martinez, United States Navy SEALs, she said crisply. I've served 3 tours of duty in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, and 1 classified mission that I'm not authorized to discuss. I've been awarded the Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, and a Purple Heart. I've completed the same training as every other SEAL, met the same standards, and passed the same tests. The silence that followed her words was so complete that they could hear the distant sound of other recruits training on the obstacle course half a mile away. Jake's mouth fell open. His face had gone pale beneath his earlier flush of anger and embarrassment. You're a SEAL? I am, Sarah confirmed. And before you ask, yes, women can be SEALs. We've been able to serve in combat roles since 2013, and in special operations since 2016. The standards weren't lowered for us. We met the same requirements as everyone else. Ryan sat down heavily on a nearby equipment crate, his head in his hands. Oh my God. We just tried to intimidate a Navy SEAL. Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear into the ground. Ma'am, we didn't know. We thought. You thought exactly what you said you thought, Sarah interrupted. You assumed that because I'm a woman, I must be weak, incompetent, and out of place in a military environment. You decided to teach me a lesson about why women don't belong here. She paused, letting that sink in. How do you think that worked out for you? Tommy, who had been the wisest of the 4 by backing down, stepped forward. Ma'am, I want to apologize. What we said and did was completely wrong. There's no excuse for it. Sarah nodded at him approvingly. Thank you, Recruit Rodriguez. That takes character. She turned to address all 4 of them. Gentlemen, you're about to enter a military where you'll serve alongside people of all backgrounds, genders, and experiences. Some of your fellow service members will be women. Some of those women will be doctors who might save your life in a field hospital. Some will be pilots flying you to safety under enemy fire. Some will be your commanding officers. And yes, some will be special operations personnel who could be the difference between completing a mission successfully or not coming home at all. Jake finally found his voice, though it was much quieter and more respectful than before. Ma'am, how do we know who to respect? I mean, how do we know who's who? Sarah's expression softened slightly. That's actually a good question, Recruit Morrison. Here's the answer. You respect everyone until they give you a reason not to. Every person wearing a military uniform has earned the right to be here. They've all sworn the same oath you've sworn, to defend this country and Constitution. That automatically makes them deserving of basic respect and courtesy. She began walking slowly around the group as she continued. You don't have to like everyone you serve with. You don't have to be friends with all of them. But you do have to treat them as professional equals until their actions prove otherwise. What you never do is assume someone is inferior or incompetent based on their gender, race, or any other characteristic that has nothing to do with their military performance. Petty Officer Jenkins, who had been standing quietly during this impromptu lesson, cleared his throat. If I may, ma'am, these recruits are supposed to be in morning PT. In 15 minutes, Sarah checked her watch. Thank you, Petty Officer. That gives us just enough time to finish this conversation. She turned back to the recruits. I want each of you to understand something clearly. The actions you took today, surrounding someone you perceived as vulnerable, making threats, using intimidation tactics, that's not strength. That's bullying. Real strength is protecting those who need protection, showing respect to your fellow service members, and having the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it's not popular. She looked directly at Tommy. Recruit Rodriguez showed real strength when he backed down instead of escalating the situation. That took more courage than throwing a punch would have. Tommy straightened up, surprised by the praise. Ryan raised his hand tentatively. Ma'am, what happens now? Are we going to be written up for this? Sarah considered the question. That depends on what I see from you going forward. This can be a learning experience that makes you better sailors and better men, or it can be the beginning of a disciplinary process. The choice is entirely up to you. And, Marcus stepped forward, his voice sincere. Ma'am, we want to learn. We want to do better. Good, Sarah replied. Then here's what's going to happen. Each of you is going to write a one-page essay on the importance of respect and professionalism in the military. You're going to research the history of women in combat roles and learn about some of the service members who paved the way for integration. And you're going to attend a presentation I'm giving next week on diversity and special operations. Jake nodded eagerly. Yes, ma'am. Anything else? Yes, Sarah said firmly. You're going to think very carefully about the attitudes that led to this situation, and you're going to make sure they don't happen again, because the next woman you decide to corner might not be as patient as I was today. She might be someone's sister, daughter, or wife who doesn't appreciate being threatened, and she might not stop at simply demonstrating that your assumptions were wrong. The 4 recruits stood at attention as she finished speaking. Furthermore, Sarah continued, if I hear about any of you displaying similar behavior toward any other personnel, male or female, there will be consequences. Am I clear? Yes, ma'am, they responded in unison. Sarah's expression finally warmed into something approaching a smile. Good. Now, you have PT in 12 minutes, and I suspect your drill instructor won't be sympathetic if you're late because you were getting educated by a woman you tried to intimidate. As the recruits hurried away, Jenkins shook his head in amazement. Ma'am, I have to ask, did you really take down all 4 of them in under 20 seconds? Sarah grinned. Actually, it was 18 seconds. But who's counting? She walked away, leaving Jenkins staring after her with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. Behind them, the 4 recruits were running toward their PT formation, each lost in thoughts about assumptions, respect, and what it really meant to be strong. The morning sun had climbed higher in the sky, and the base was coming fully alive with the sounds and sights of military training. Somewhere in the distance, a drill instructor was calling cadence as recruits marched in formation. It was just another day at the Naval Training Center, except that 4 young men had learned a lesson they would carry with them for the rest of their military careers. Later that evening, the 4 recruits would sit together in their barracks, writing their essays and researching military history with a new appreciation for the service members who had broken barriers and faced prejudice to serve their country. They would discover stories of courage and sacrifice that had nothing to do with gender and everything to do with character. And they would never again assume that anyone was incapable or unworthy based on appearance alone.